Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/spookshow. Then go over to morbidlybeautiful.com as we are now part of the Morbidly Beautiful Podcasting Network.
By special arrangement with 20th Century Fox, Magnetic Video Corporation is proud to offer the following major motion picture on video cassette.
It has been established that persons who have recently died have been returning to life and committing acts of murder.
Have you checked the children?
I want to play a game. The box. You opened it. We came.
Here.
This is the All-American Spookshow.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the All-American Spookshow podcast. I'm Josh, and I'm joined here with Donny.
Hey.
And the Professor Smoak.
What's up?
Will could not be with us this week. He's on assignment. Also, too, it continues our streak of all of us not being on the same episode together. I think like the last time we were all on the same episode, in our weekly shows, was all the way back to episode 101, Night of the Living Dead. I think ever since then,
it might have been Frankenhooker when we were all in Spookshow Studios.
I think we were all there for the next week, Night of the Living Dead, but we haven't ever since. Like somebody's been on vacation, sick, various reasons, whatever. Everybody's had their little reasons, but hopefully he'll be back next week for Hellraiser 3. But anyways, yeah, so today we're here for the latest Spookshow Spotlight home video part 1. We're going to go ahead and say part 1 because we know this is going to go kind of long.
Yeah. And
we're going to kind of divide it up into at least 3 parts, maybe 4 parts. And also because Camp Spook Show is going to be starting on June 6th, with episode 111. There will be a kind of a delay between we're doing part 1 today, but part 2 and so on probably won't be until August or September. I'll admit it now. It's going to be a little while, but we've wanted to do this this subject for a while. Smoak, this might have been one of the earliest little topics that we thought of all the way back to late 2018, 2019, where we need to get around to that, and we just haven't done it, right?
Yeah. We keep mentioning it, and I know we've mentioned a bunch of home video nuggets, if you will, over the years.
Yeah.
On each individual episode when the issue came up.
All right, so I guess before we get into the home video part 1, the whole history of everything we've got here, Smoak, you were not here back when we did Deathgasm. Now, you've been on since then, but you didn't get a chance to watch it again. That was episode 103. You said you had seen it before, but you didn't get a chance to watch it again until recently. So I guess we'll take this time to go ahead and give your thoughts on the movie and give us your star rating and the Gore Score for that one.
Yeah. I remember when I first saw it, when it was, I don't know what the year was when that came out on. At any rate, I remember liking it when I first saw it. And, what's not to like about it, it's heavy metal and horror. But I'd forgotten, details and things. I remember it being pretty gory. I remember, that's cool. And, the whole metal aspect, of course, I'm going to be down with that. But so then rewatching it this time again, I assume I liked it better than I did the first time because it was second time around. You get to see more things you didn't necessarily catch the first time around or whatever. So yeah, it very much reminds me of Trick or Treat, with the possession aspect a little bit. But speaking of the possession aspect, another movie that it reminds me of is Evil Dead because it's the zombies. The gore factor though just grabs you. It takes a little while before things start happening because you got to wait till the possession stuff to kick in. But before that, you get all the metal aspect of it, and it's got good characterization, I think, of the people in the movie. But yeah, as soon as that gore kicks in, it's just almost nonstop. I really enjoyed it the second time around, and I haven't seen the episode yet that y'all are on, so I don't know what y'all's ratings are on it. That being said, I think I give it a 3 3/4.
So before you give the Gore Score, I'll tell you what we said. Donnie gave it 4 stars. Will gave it 3 3/4, and I gave it 3.5. So we're all pretty much right in the same ballpark.
Yeah, within a half a star or so.
Yeah, basically a quarter of a star, yeah, half a star. So with your rating, that brings it up to a consensus score of 3 3/4 stars, exactly.
Nice.
So nice. I think well deserved. Now, I that was actually my choice, in the rotation. I picked the movie, and Smoak, that's why I was upset that you weren't able to be there for that one, because I kind of picked that one with you. I picked that one with you in mind because I knew you would have a few opinions on that movie for sure.
Yeah, I really hate that I missed that one. I think that was when I was in Florida
Yeah, I think
I believe.
one of your many vacations that you've taken.
Yeah, that was one I definitely hated to miss, just because of like I said, I hadn't seen it in a long time, so I couldn't remember I remember liking it a lot, but I couldn't remember the specifics of it. Like everything that we do, you hate to miss anything that we do.
Yeah.
I mean, you do the show.
Yeah, we all have a lot of fun doing these, so it does suck when we're missing, and that's why I said the fact that we all haven't been there on the same episode since Night of the Living Dead, episode 101, that sucks, because I like it when we're all here, being able to have a good time and give the ratings and everything. But before we move on past Deathgasm, I'll go ahead and let you do your Gore Score.
Gore Score.
This is one of the juiciest ones we've had, I think. I can think of in recent memory, in any memory really, other than Terrorizer. Terrified, right?
Terrifier.
Terrifier.
Yeah.
Sam the Terrified and Terrorizing. Yeah. That's been one of the. I don't remember what I gave that one exactly. I might have gave that one a 10. But
I've got the scores up here. The only thing you've given a 10 to was Reanimator, Terrifier,
and Terrifier. Yeah, the gore in this one, first of all, is hot and heavy. It just comes once it gets to that point, which is I forget. I didn't make a note of the time, but once it happens, then it's pretty much almost nonstop of stuff going on all the way to the end of the movie. And the thing about it is too, it's sort of that good-natured, fun sort of splatter. And we've talked about this before. Terrifier.
Yeah.
That's probably there's that one specific scene in that movie. There's a bunch of scenes in it that are gory, but there's one specific one like, oh, when that happens, you like feel it, and it's got that sort of mean-spirited like sickness kind of thing to it. That's probably the closest we've come yet. But once we get to movies like Cannibal Holocaust, etc., all those, they're in a whole other league when it comes to that. And that there's some sort of rating. I said that whenever we get to one of those, I'm gonna have to come up with a 10 plus something to denote the like those ones that make you want to take a shower after you're watching it. Like disgusting mixed with mean spiritedness.
It's 10x.
Have that. This movie is like that fun sort of splatter gore. Like I said, it kind of reminds me of like Sam Raimi's Evil Dead movies with a humor mixed in with the gore and everything, or like Reanimator. So it's good nature all the way through, and it's really plentiful. So my thing is now whether I'm deciding on whether I'm going to give it a 9 or a 10, because again, it's kind of like splitting hairs. But I mean, it's Reanimator. I gave it 10. This movie is definitely as gory as, if not more gory. I guess I'll go with I might as well go with a 10, right?
Yeah, I mean, damn buckets of blood in this movie for sure, but it's fun-natured buckets of blood.
Yeah, good nature. It's splatter.
That's good.
Splatter.
It was a lot of fun.
The other one was that catches you up to date, Smoak. But Donny, you're not up to date because you weren't here for session 9.
I was not. Man.
Last
week. I hated to miss this one, man. This was Smoak's pick, and I remember when he picked it, I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, yeah," because oh man, I enjoyed this when I saw it because I wasn't expecting anything. I was just like, okay, yeah. I mean, this sounds kind of interesting as far as insane asylum and the whole setting and everything. But yeah, the first time I watched it, I was, like I said, I just wasn't expecting it, and it definitely made the thing. Like when I watched it the second time, it was God, I haven't seen it in many years. This was only the second time I've seen it, but like it was to the point where it basically makes you think. It makes you, you have some kind of theories, or you're not really sure if like was all of that just like. Did he just imagine it?
Yeah, I mean, we spent a great deal of that episode debating just that. Like, was it supernatural? Was it just this dude just lost his mind? Yeah. Spoiler alert. If you haven't seen session 9, you should probably pause right now, go check it out, and then come back. But and of course, go listen to our episode after that as well. The whole episode from last week about it. But when the stuff happens with his family. Has he just lost his mind at that point and just fuck the world? Or is there something supernatural in that hospital?
Yeah, that's also true. And something and obviously I didn't think about it at this time, but because hadn't been made. But I thought a lot about Shutter Island when just some of it's just connects some dots.
I think that one got brought up. I think Will brought that one up, right, Smoke? Like in comparison, I think Shutter Island was one of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, shit. Yeah. Well, good to know I'm not the only one who kind of made those connections. But no, I enjoyed it. I star rating. Oh man, I would say probably the only. I want to say the only. I mean, because it did not pace well at all. It was slow. It's definitely a slow burn.
I think that was on purpose, but yeah. Some of that. I think it's on purpose.
Yeah. Thing is, like, it's good enough to where, for me and my scale, it has to be, 3 stars, at least 3 stars if I'm going to see this again, and this definitely is there. I'm going to settle in on 3.25.
This is one of those ones where it's like, this is the luxury of when we have our anniversary show, our 4th anniversary in October, when you have time to kind of sit back and think about it a little bit, when we have that moment of reflection for our re-rating time.
Yeah.
Maybe you can go up, maybe you can go down, whatever you can. But for now, 3.25 or 3.25, that is going to bring the consensus score. Well, I'll tell you what our scores were. Will, same score, 3.25.
Oh, okay.
Smoke, same score, 3.25.
Oh, okay.
And my score, 3.5. So you put them all together, you come to 3.31 on the consensus score. So basically 3.25 average rating.
Yeah, it's definitely something I would recommend.
Yeah, obviously I think we all
people
highly
check
recommend
out.
And
totally.
And I think there is a little bit more discussion warranted for this one too when we have some time somewhere to talk a little bit more about it. Just so you can have more of your 2 cents about it, and we can kind of maybe flesh some more out about it. It was an interesting pick, Smoke, for that reason alone, because it spurred a lot of conversation. Which is one of the main things we want to do here. So it was an excellent choice in that regard. Donnie, did you have any time to pull any crypt connections for that or not, or we can get to that at some other point?
There were no connections at all. I looked everywhere. When I say everywhere, the of what we usually keep track of. Yeah. I mean, I just recently added stuntmen, but there were no. I mean, as far as stunt crews. Because that was something that I added for cannon fodder.
Yeah.
No, I didn't find any connections at all to anyone else.
So yeah, before we dive into it, I'll go ahead and throw out the usual information. You can contact us at allamericanspookshow@gmail.com. Find us on by searching for All American Spook Show on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, the Slasher app, over on YouTube. That we have a Linktree link down in the show notes. You click that, you should have links to all these things, plus our TeePublic page where we sell logoed merchandise and other cool designs we have over there. And of course, patreon.com/spookshow, where we have bonus content every month, including Spook Show Rewind, Crapster Piece Theater, Professor's Retro Review articles. You get early access to podcast episodes, weekly video minisodes every Tuesday with the Library of the Professor. So tons of stuff. We're just throwing it at you left and right over on patreon.com/spookshow. So we want you to be a patron and join us over there today. So I guess we'll just go ahead and dive right into it. Now, I guess we'll start as simple as this. How do you define home video? Now, I actually looked it up. This was on, I believe, dictionary.com. Home video is actually defined as 2 things. A videotape recorded by camcorder, generally for non-commercial use, especially for viewing at home. So that's like your home movies and stuff. Also, it's defined as the business of renting or selling pre-recorded video cassettes for viewing, especially at home. Now, I'm going to assume that definition gets more broad as the years go by. Obviously, we're about to go through that, where it starts as film and eventually becomes tapes and DVDs and Blu-rays and all that stuff that it eventually turns into. But as best we can tell, it started off with the late 1800s, early 1900s is different types of film, right, Smoke?
Yeah. I mean, if you want to go now, we're not talking about home video, but we're talking about, let's say, home markets. Home watching things at home or whatever. You can go all the way back to, now this wasn't watching things at home, but 1888. That was the very first, if you want to call it a movie, It was technically it was only 2 seconds long, and Guinness Book of World Records actually lists it as the first movie, but it's only 2 seconds, you know. And basically, it's a home movie. So there's a little bit of a tie in. The very first film was a home movie. It was called Roundhay Gordon Sequence, and it was basically two seconds, like I said, of these people in a garden. Birth of home video. We're not going into film too deeply, but this is contested. Maybe we'll do a spotlight on the birth of cinema or something later. That could be contested because there was some stop motion thing before 1888 that some people claim that is the first movie, but technically that was just stop motion, you know, single images for those couple of people that don't know what stop motion is, right? Those single images as you run them in the sequence and make moving video, right? But technically it wasn't motion captured on film. So the 1888 movie I just talked about was the first thing that was actually film that captured motion on it. So the first motion picture, then that was 1888. And it was a whole movie. And beyond that, then we get to, 1906. That was where discussion between like film entrepreneurs when they were trying to decide how they could get people at home to watch films. And then beyond that, I'll let one of you take over for the next step in the evolution.
Yeah, it basically it was born. You know, home video was born initially as a rental business. It was 1912. There was Edison and there was a French. It was two brothers, Pathé brothers. They started selling film projectors for home use, basically, and the owners of those, the people who bought them, they rented these films by mail from the manufacturer, either Edison or Pathé. But we were kind of talking a little bit off air, but they couldn't have lasted that long. You know, it's like if you think about film being so expensive, even today,
it wasn't a solid business model in terms of being able to make a lot of money off of that, because it probably wasn't that many people that had projectors either.
Yeah.
So that alone, forget the price of renting the films, just the fact that how many people at that time in the early adoption of this technology would have had a projector.
Yeah.
I believe
the means to view it.
Yeah. And I believe that when we looked at that, like it even said like, that only lasted a couple of years, and like Edison was out, and then eventually the Pathé brothers were out, and then it just kind of went away. So basically, like from what I can tell, as far as like the little bit of research we did, you kind of, once Edison and Pathé were kind of out of it, you kind of fast forward to 1924. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, there might be something in between, Smoak, that you might have, but in 1924, Kodak invented the 16 millimeter film, which kind of became popular for home use, and then later developed the 8 millimeter film. So that kind of became the way that, a lot of people started viewing their own home, taping or filming, I should say, and watching their own home movies and stuff, right?
Yeah, they could pretty much purchase a cut down version of these films, where it would be not the full length, because to put a full length movie on a 16 millimeter would probably taken more than one reel, of course, and it was already expensive as it was. So to get it on one reel, they would just cut it in those sort of highlights and things.
Donny, I think you had something on that, right?
It's still super expensive.
Yeah, I would assume so. Yeah.
Yeah, it was actually, once they invented the 16 millimeter, it was after that point, the public could actually purchase the projectors, and then they could either rent or buy some of those highlight reels that Smoak was talking about. Some cartoons, some little short comedies. There were actually some entire feature films that you could either rent or buy, in 16 millimeter. But the 8 millimeter films, which they actually later developed, those never ran any longer than 10 minutes.
That's just crazy. And they wouldn't have had sound either, so like there must have been some kind of other tape or record or something that you would get along with it to play along with it, right?
Mm.
You would think.
Yeah, those early days, the first, what is it, Standard 8, they would call it?
Mm-hmm.
Have audio, wouldn't record it, but and it would still be the cut down versions. In fact, even more cut down than the 16 millimeter, because you couldn't get as much in, on the reels. But it was a lot more affordable.
Yeah.
Still though, still not affordable enough for a lot of people to have it. So even all the way up through film, through the history of film in the home, so to speak. It was ported as a niche market for film buffs, pretty much, and those that could afford it. Or also, I mean, it's not like we think of today. We just throw a disc in a machine or throw a tape in the machine. It was a lot of setup involved.
Yeah,
making actors run right. A lot of technical aspects to it that most people wouldn't.
Yeah,
you wouldn't. You would have to have some knowledge of. So really, just a niche market up to that.
So most people, not only could they not afford it, they're just not even going to bother with it, because like, fuck all that, I'll just go to the drive-in.
Whole film either, unless the 16 millimeter, you can get the whole film, and it's really expensive. But you're not getting sound when it comes to 8 millimeter or the whole entire movie. So.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The management of this drive-in theater is happy to announce you can enjoy your favorite form of movie entertainment regardless of rain. No longer will it be necessary to let rain spoil your fun. Now you can keep your windshield clear and dry with a Drizzle Guard. Simply attach it to your windshield, and in a jiffy, you're enjoying the movie without constantly running your windshield wipers.
From what I could tell, the first company to duplicate and distribute feature films for major film studios on home video was Magnetic Video. Now, you're kind of fast-forwarding to the 70s there, kind of with that, right, into the early to mid-70s, but did I think you had some notes, Smoak, on like some stuff that might have happened in between there?
Yeah, I had a little bit of a few, like if you come from, say, 1932, and we're talking about 8 millimeter, or, standard 8 millimeter, come a little bit forward from that, before we get into Super 8, which we touched on a little bit. 1956 was an important date for home video. Well, not for home video. Well, in the long run, it would be an important date for home video. But Ampex released their 1-inch reel-to-reel videotape. And, of course, that wasn't for the home market, but it was important to video in general because it was a video. It was magnetic videotape, played from one reel to another reel. Very bulky, though, so it was mainly for broadcast televisions and other industrial type settings. So, but an important invention for the later, home video market. That was 1956. A lot of people don't think about that. When they think of videotape, they think of the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really think of 1956 as being sort of the birth of the format itself. Then you come forward a little bit more to 1965, and that's when Super 8 was released, and we kind of talked about that a little bit. But the thing about Super 8 that was cool was then you could have sound on the film itself. Again, though, you're limited to like 10 minutes or so of reels. You'd have to have a few reels to get, you aren't going to have, I'm pretty sure, I'm 100% on it, but I don't believe they released full movies even on Super 8 because you would have to have a ton of reels. Maybe they did. Maybe they had a whole box set of them. I don't know, but you're still pretty much dealing with highlights of movies and little short film strips and things. And then I guess at that point, then we come, like you said, to 1971. I don't know if you had any information in 1971. I had a little bit more on that. Again, mainly on broadcast type stuff. And this is something that y'all would be familiar with as well as I from working in master control TV stations and whatnot. 1971, Sony released the U-matic video cassette, which was a 3/4 inch.
3/4 inch, yeah.
Which was, of course, the standard before digital Betamax and all that stuff came into being, or Betacam SPs and all that, so those things. So when I first started working in broadcast, when I went to school for communications technology, they had a PBS station there at that college, and that's what I worked at. That was my first, experience with something other than VHS or Betamax was 3/4 inch, as well as those 1-inch reel-to-reels that they had as well.
Yeah, I've only had to in my career in news editing, I've only had to mess with 3/4 inch tapes for archive purposes. Looking at the old videos and stuff. So like that's a whole thing in and of itself. That stuff's so old now. Like anytime you go to pull that stuff or, you have to digitize it, if you can find a working machine, first off, you're hitting a home run right there. But if you can have a working machine, then you pop the tape in, you'll be lucky if the tape doesn't snap, because you're talking about 40, 50-year-old stuff now, so. Yeah, and that was important, again, to home video because it was, like I mentioned before, the reel-to-reel in 1956 was the, invention of sort of a magnetic video, but this was the first time that they could be put into a cassette. And again, the U-matic, though, was not, they tried to market this for consumers, but it ended up being way too expensive, so they found their target with industrial
corporations and, of course, broadcast television. That's where that pneumatic went in. Oh, and then 1972 will come ahead a little bit more than 1972, still before the birth of Betamax. But this was the first that I could find commercially available videotape machine for your, consumers. And it was Phillips released we think of VCR. When you say VCR, people mainly think of that nowadays in terms of, well, a Betamax is a VCR, a VHS is a VCR. It means video cassette recorder. But this particular instrument that Phillips put out was called a VCR, but it was a video cassette recording, I guess, for a video cassette recording device. And it actually has a logo, VCR. I'd never even heard about this one. I mean, being a fan of VHS and stuff, I heard about it later. But when I was, my younger days, even in TV days, when I first started learning about that stuff, I never even heard of this format. But it's Philips VCR, and it's got its own little logo and everything. It was the first successful consumer videotape system, but they didn't rent anything on it. See, there was no movies. It was, you could record stuff or whatever off TV or whatever, but there was no movies rented out on this. So that's probably why it didn't last too long.
Yeah, that was probably before the movie studios started playing ball with it, right? With the whole home video craze.
There was a system that did come out that did rent, and I don't know if did y'all ever get any information on the Cartridge system?
No, I didn't see that one.
This would be the first. They rented movies and everything on it, but it didn't last long. So that's why it's not really. It is part of course, the home video, birth of home video, but it's not necessarily. It didn't have longevity. Basically, it's a television set with this system built into it. So it's kind of like you think of VCR TV combos. Well, this is probably the first one of those. It was a huge television set. They're like the old school furniture pieces of TV with the Cartridge system built in. And it was a videotape format. And they did do movie rentals. You'd have to basically go to a retailer, and then they would have a catalog of like however many titles. I think it was like 200 titles. And you would choose whatever movie you wanted. They would mail it to you. After you watched it, you would take it back to the retailer. It was kind of short-lived, though. It died off, and then pretty much after that point, then that's when we come up to 1975. And I'll let one of y'all want to take over for what you're talking about, Josh. I think it's where you had the birth of Beta, right?
Yeah, that was basically 1976 when Betamax was launched here in the United States. And like I said, that was Magnetic Video. Basically, the CEO, the chief executive of Magnetic Video, Andre Blay, says he wrote letters to all the major film studios offering to license the rights to their film. So this would be the very beginnings of, all right, well, now we have, we've got these tapes. We're getting these VCRs, like you said, out to homes. Now we need to get a catalog going of studio movies. And I'm sure there was probably some blowback because, the way it had always been done up to that point was theaters, the theater system. So I'm sure they probably weren't happy with this at first, right?
Nah. Well, I know one stipulation he had on those titles, like when he first started, not first started. I guess if you go back to the beginning of Magnetic Video, they started in 1968, and they were an audio-video duplication service, basically. But then in 1975, I think in Japan, when the Betamax first came out, and I want to say some part, maybe mid 75 or so, or something like that. Wasn't until 76 when it hit the U.S. And then when it hit the U.S., I guess that's when Andre Blay was like, oh, wait a minute. And then he had this epiphany of, I guess he could, saw the writing on the wall, so to speak, and created this part of Magnetic Video where they would acquisition these titles. And first, I think 20th Century Fox was the first studio that accepted his deal, but the stipulation was that the movies had to be at least 2 years old and had already aired on broadcast television at one point. So it wasn't like brand new movies. They weren't letting them touch those yet.
Donnie, I saw in our notes there you had a little bit more information on the terms there. Magnetic Video with Fox.
Yeah, this was first of its kind. Like we've already mentioned. So Magnetic Video, they agreed to pay Fox a royalty of, now granted this is $1977. I'll get to the inflation, what it calculates for inflation. But so Magnetic Video agreed to pay Fox a royalty of $7.50 per unit sold, which equates to $35, like over $35 per unit sold in today's money. and a guaranteed annual minimum payment of $500,000 in exchange for non-exclusive rights to 50 films. The stipulations to those films, they had to be at least 2 years old and had already been, put on TV.
That's what Smoak just mentioned there, that they had to have been aired on network television.
Yep. And then also in 1977, Magnetic Video, they originally priced their video cassettes, now granted this is $1977, at $50 to $70 each, which is still insane. But in 2022 dollars, that is $230 to $330.
God.
Can you imagine paying that for a?
No.
It was pricey back then, and crazy. But you compare that to the average price of a movie ticket back then was $2.23, I believe it was, which averages in today's dollars to $10.64. So it's about right.
Yeah, so that's about roughly what you probably pay at most movie theaters, even today.
Yeah.
So it all equals out as far as inflation is concerned. But yeah, that's so basically these things were not priced for almost anyone to actually go buy and bring home.
No, they only sold them to wholesalers, whoever that could basically order a minimum of $8,000, which in today's number would be over $38,000.
And Smoak, we've talked about that before, how a lot of this was set up to where, and we'll get into that, I'm sure, either here in a second or in the next part, when you start getting into video rental stores, these cassettes, these videos were basically priced for them to buy and then just rent the shit out of to people, and that's how they paid for them, right?
Yeah, they would. Yeah, they priced them this high. Well, first of all, Andre Blay himself, he created something called the Video Club of America, and that's where he would mail or sell these videos to people that could afford them, I guess. And that is where we basically get to. And I don't know where we're at with this at the point of what stopping point we're going to be at, but a good place to get to would be the true birth of home video rental. I mean, we've already talked about these little, mail order things with the Cartridge and this and that, but it was really that Video Club of America that he started that people would buy from. And this guy named George Atkinson, through that Video Club of America, I guess he purchased one of each of those 50 titles on beta and on VHS. And then he started a rental service where people would basically pay for, I think it was $50 for a year. Yeah, $50 for an annual membership or $100 for a lifetime membership. And you would charge $10 a day for the rentals. So that right there is the true birth of, you want to call it entrepreneurship, a brick and mortar video rental place to go to that you get. Before that, it was just mail order. Nobody was renting these things.
So what you just said is basically you paid a membership fee, $50 a year or $100 for a lifetime, but you still had to pay $10 a month. You said to rent the
$10 per $10 a day for the rental for one movie.
Wow.
Basically, it was like a one-day rental for $10. You had to bring it back the next day.
This must have been like the early seeds of Columbia House or something.
Yeah, if we're talking today's numbers, that would be almost $48 a day.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's on top of like I said, the $50 a year or $100 lifetime.
What's the inflation on that? $50 for a year.
$50 for a year? That would be $238.
So you pay that for the year, and then you'd be paying like 40-something bucks a day in today's money just to rent the movies.
And that probably was still cheaper than any prior service had been.
Well, yeah, probably.
Yeah, nowadays you look at it even, you come 15 years forward from that to where you got Blockbusters and things where they're, selling renting these things for, different times. But I mean, really at one point you could rent them on a Friday and not have to bring them back till Monday.
Yeah.
For, $2 or $3 a movie or something. And then after a while, not too long after that, they started, was it 5-day rentals or something? Where you just pay the same price?
It was something like that, like 5 days or up to a week or something like that by the last time I remember dealing with all that. But yeah, we'll get deeper into that rabbit hole and further parts for sure, because that's a whole thing in and of itself. But I think it's interesting to get up to this point. I guess we got a couple minutes here before we wrap it up. We'll kind of put a pin in it right there as far as like leading into the VHS Betamax wars and the true birth and blossoming of the home rental, the mom and pop video stores, the big box, all that kind of stuff. But you can take a couple minutes to explain one of the formats that came out around that time was CEDs, right?
Yeah, we can go a little bit forward to, before, like you said, the Betamax VHS wars we'll get to on another episode, but CEDs, and that was 1981 when CED came out.
So it's around that same time period. And like, now were CEDs something that got rented out? I think you said you did rent some, right? So I guess that was something, one of the early things that got rented, right? Other than VHS and Betamax.
Yeah, because like I said, well, Betamax, as we talked about, came out in 76 or so, but nobody could really afford it that much other than, by 77, some more people could. In 77, VHS it came out. But again, they were not everybody had them just because the instruments, emerging technology is always going to be expensive no matter what it is. So it wouldn't be really until the 80s that your average consumer could really afford, the price could come down because they had manufactured them for a couple of years by that point to where they could get the price down on them. So it was in the 80s that I remember renting, before we even had any sort of Betamax or anything, going to the video store and renting the player, the CED player, which CED stands for Capacitance Electronic Disc. And basically looks like a record album with a hard plastic sleeve that you push in, this whole sleeve goes into the device. And then it grabs the disc, the little slots on the disc inside the player, and you pull the sleeve out, and then the disc stays in the player. And there's a stylus in there that plays the disc basically like a turntable. We rented this machine from the local video store and the movies to go with it. And one of those, I remember it being like Dragon Slayer, Revenge of the Ninja. And I'll tell a quick story about this, the CED, my first experience with CED. We rented this stuff, rented the movies for us, and my dad rented his movies, quote, his movies, yeah. It was in the back. It was like some Playboy or Penthouse thing or whatever, something like that. And so, it's me and my cousin and, his family and whatever. And so we rented the movies we wanted to see, and then they rented their movies. And the next day when they were at work, we're like, hey, let's watch Dad's movie. So, yeah, nobody's home but us, so we put this thing in there and we start watching it, right? Like, oh, yeah. And then, oh, shit, we better stop because, they're going to be getting home from work soon. So, okay, let's put it back in the sleeve. When you put the sleeve in there, put the disc with the other disc where it was or whatever, right? Then that night we were going to watch one of those movies. I think it was Class. I don't know if you remember that comedy drama movie called Class.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, it was one of those just typical comedy dramas from the time. And we were going to watch that sort of as a family. So he gets the disc and goes to put it in there, puts the sleeve in there, and all of a sudden the Penthouse thing starts playing. And me and my cousin look at each other like, boom, like eyes like, oh, shit.
Humana.
Like, what the hell? How is this playing or whatever? We're like, I don't know.
Man, these CED players are crazy, huh, Pop?
So he puts the sleeve of the Penthouse thing in there, like to pull that disc out. Then turns out somehow or other, whenever we went to take the sleeve, put the sleeve into the instrument to take the Penthouse one out, it didn't come out. The sleeve came out, but the disc still stayed in there. And we thought we had taken it out. So when he put the other one in there, it somehow inserted both discs into the player. It inserted the Class movie on top of the Penthouse movie. So it was still playing Penthouse one, but the Class one was sitting on top. So when he put the sleeve in there to pull it out, he pulled both movies out in the one plastic sleeve. So now he's got this, he's trying to he tried to take it out and it broke. Basically the disc broke because those things they're just as flimsy, if not more flimsier than a vinyl disc.
Yeah.
God almighty.
So he broke it trying to get it out, and then, boy, I thought he was going to tear him out and my cousin's asses up.
Yeah, I bet.
He was going to have to pay for this, like, $90, whatever it was, So he took it back to the video store. I'm sure he told the guy, what happened. The guy, they probably had a good laugh about it, and then he didn't charge him or anything.
Yeah, I've seen the CED disc, and they're basically kind of like, if anybody remembers, like the inside of like a floppy disk or something. It's kind of what they reminded me of.
Yeah.
Like very thin, easy to mess up. But yeah, that's a funny story to end this episode on. We'll put a pin in it there. And next time we come back around to this, like I said, it might be 2 or 3 months, but we will come back around to this subject on Spookshow Spotlight, and we'll get into the birth of the video rental stores and the Betamax, VHS wars, and everything else that took place in the early to mid 80s. So, honestly, that subject right there, just everything I just described there alone, is probably a whole part of this series. So, this has been a cool, kind of informative look back on the history of the early history of home video and everything. So hope you enjoyed it, and we'll get to it in further parts. Next week we return to our horror reviews, and this time it's a wild card choice. It's not one of our choices in particular, but since we've already done the first 2 in the Hellraiser series, we figured we'd dip back in and go to Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth. So that's just the return of the Cenobites and Pinhead and everything. So I can't think of the damn Cenobites without thinking of Cinnabon anymore. Like, it's just burned into my head now. It's just the way it is.
About the same level of
about the same level of hell. Either way. But yeah, that's coming up next week, and then the next week, on Memorial Day, we have a special Cannon Fodder episode, Invasion USA, the Chuck Norris Cannon Films classic, and of course we'll have our recurring segment from Cannon Film Guide author Austin Trunick, whose new book, The Cannon Film Guide, Volume 2. If it's not out currently, it will be out very soon. I think he said sometime in the month of May. Last I heard, he didn't have a particular date, but it sounded like sometime this month the book will be out. So hopefully, as soon as we find out when that book is available, we will let you know, and we'll have Austin on for the little segment for Invasion USA, but we'll also get the latest on when that book's coming out. So I guess that's
even me, who doesn't like books.
Yeah. The guy that will never read it still is looking forward to the release of this book.
No, I mean, I've got the first one. I just haven't started.
I'll say, if nothing else, man, it's an awesome guide. Like, it's not necessarily like a chapter book. It's not like a book you're going to read, front to back kind of thing. Although you can, I mean, the way he wrote it and the way he put it together, I mean, he really did do a great job on it. But when we're doing these Cannon Fodders, or if you out there listening, you're just watching Cannon movies, it's the perfect thing to pull out and like find out all the background information. He's got cool interviews with behind the scenes people, actors and actresses, everything in that book, man. He did a great job, and I'm sure the second one's going to be just as good, if not better. Matter of fact, we know that it's over 1,000 pages. He told us that. So this book is going to be like the fucking Cannon Bible, basically. And he's still got volume 3, maybe even a volume 4 in him. So he's got a lot of work he's put into this, and a lot more to come. So he's a friend of the show. We'll have his little segment for Invasion USA, and Camp Spook Show is right after that, starting in June 6th, episode 111. So lots of stuff cooking in the Spook Show universe. So for Will, who couldn't be with us, Donny, Professor Smoak, I'm Josh. We are the All-American Spook Show Podcast, and we'll talk to you next week.
As you leave the theater, folks, please be careful. Don't let this happen to your car. Be sure to remove the speaker before you leave. If you should accidentally pull a speaker loose, please turn it in at our snack bar or box office. Thank you.